Well, hey there, and thank you for joining us here for just another step along on the discipleship pathway. I'm so glad that you decided to join us. Today, I'm being joined by Kent Solner, and we're talking about the subject of money, and we're talking about it from the spiritual child perspective. And the question that we're chasing after is, why does God even care about my money? And to be honest with you, what I'm hoping that you'll hear from this conversation is that God cares a lot about it because he cares about your faith journey, and this is a part of it. So I'm excited to dive into this conversation with you and with Kent. But before we get started, Kent, tell us a little bit about who you are and your faith journey.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so my name's Kent Solner. My wife, Linnell, and I have been at Lakeland now for over 10 years. Time goes fast, but we've been here for over 10 years. So in that 10 years that we've been here in Wisconsin, our faith has absolutely exploded. So we have God first in our lives in all things we do. The one thing where I've tremendously matured in the last 10 years is just in the power of prayer. We own that every day, and we live in that every day. So it's been very powerful. Just background, I grew up in a Lutheran church in a Christian family, but really it was after college that I totally accepted Jesus and my faith really started to explode.
So we're talking about money for the spiritual child. And again, answering that question, why does God even care about my money? Further along here on the pathway, we'll get really more focused in on this extravagant generosity. But just for the sake of being able to help people along and answer that question, why does God care about my money? We really wanted to know, because this is a passion area for you. We wanted to know, why are you so passionate when it comes to God and finances?
It hasn't always been that way. I mean, it is something that in my relationship with God, it is stirred in my heart. I've always been a saver since I was a kid. And it's something that honestly that I instill in our kids today. We have 3 kids, and we talk about it all the time. The saving mentality, and it's not a hoarding thing. I just view it as more of a planning thing. But when I was first in the church, tithing was hard for me. I didn't want to because I had a saving mentality. Anytime money came up in a sermon, anytime money came up in a conversation, I went cold on it. It was something that my heart had a hard time with. But it's something that I've truly accepted. If it's okay, I can just share kind of as that story has gone, or how it blew up in me is. It got to a point where I was reluctantly tithing, okay? And so there was a trip with myself and my father-in-law and another gentleman. We're out in the middle of the mountains. We were elk hunting. And the conversation of tithing came up within the church. And so I kind of gave my money talk, and I was like, yeah, we tithe, but... And the other gentleman that was there with my father-in-law said, he confessed to me that he tithes off of his gross income. And I'm like, what? You tithe off of your gross income? And so it was one of those that I really respected the man. And I went back to my wife, and we prayed through it, and we talked through it. And from that point on, we started tithing on 10% of our gross income, which was a huge step and a huge struggle. But from that point on, if you could chart the activity that has happened to us financially, it's just been a tremendous blessing.
All right, so Kent, I want to hang out on this for just a second, because you said that you started to give 10% off of the gross. Now, we're talking about everything, right? I mean, I can remember back to my first job working at Cold Stone Creamery, and I got that first check, and I got offended because the state and all the taxes that were coming out. I was like, wait a second, that was the money that I earned. What's going on here? Yeah. And you're talking about before the taxes come out, you're giving 10% off of that. All right, let's talk about that, because that had to be a little stretching and a little uncomfortable. Can you talk about that a little bit?
You said it perfectly. It was stretching and very uncomfortable at first. It was, it was something that hit me when it was talk to me about someone giving on gross, I'm like, wow, just like you said, that's 10% of everything. And so it was a stretch for sure. Something I said, my wife and I, we prayed through and we did it, but the first months were rough because like I said, I'm a saver and I was a numbers person and I was always crunching out how this wasn't going to work. And every month it worked. And I get emotional because it was just the start of what really God had for us. So we went from tithing 10% of gross to where just 2 to 3 years down the road, I'm sitting in the back row of church with my wife and God puts on my heart, I'm going to get you to a point, and beyond that point, you're giving everything away. And so that's where we've been since on that journey. So it's been an unbelievable journey where since our heart posture changed to give, our income has just exploded. And we've been able to bless each other, bless families, bless just countless things with the blessings that have flown in financially.
Man, the idea of blessings, there are so many people that are listening to this right now, and they're going to want to know more about that. And as we get further along on the discipleship pathway, they're going to hear a little bit more about that. But the idea of giving in the Bible is rooted all the way back in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
The idea of it being rooted to money is something that is really fairly new in concept. But it's always been about that tithe, that giving of 10%, that first fruits. And when we talk about extravagant giving, like extravagant generosity, we think something like the widow's mite that you find in like Mark chapter 12, Luke chapter 2, where you have this widow who, while everybody else is giving their tithe, here comes this widow who gives like a very few. And for the followers of Jesus, the disciples of Jesus at the time, they're looking at this going, oh, she's not really giving very much. Like, who's really giving more? The one who's able to give this huge amount of money, or this widow who's giving so little?
Right.
And she's like, what you guys don't understand is, while everybody else is doing a tenth of what they have coming in, this woman gave all. Which isn't necessarily what we've been called to. We've always been called to a tenth, you know? But that's stretching for a lot of people.
For sure.
Like, I resonate with you when you say that you're a saver. Pastor Jason and I were talking about just yesterday that my wife handles the finances in our family, and I work off of, she just tells me when I can and can't spend something, and that's good enough for me, because if we need to hold on, we can hold on. But talking about money within the church can be so uncomfortable, and there's tons of different phrases that people love to use that are kind of pushback phrases. Sometimes you hear it like, I can't give. The math just doesn't add up right. I have more a month than there is money. Seems like the church has the money it needs. I'm just not a giver. Maybe in the future, when I'm a little bit more set, I can fill in the blank. Can you speak into those statements and why people would feel that way?
All those things resonate to the things that used to go through my mind as I looked at things. When I grew up in the Lutheran church, they would post the giving from the week prior in the bulletin. And I'm not going to lie, the first thing I did every Sunday was look at the money that was coming in. And that would be the thought, exactly what you said in my head, is the church has plenty of money. I think the example that you gave of the woman who gave little, and how in the grand scheme of things she gave the most, it's a heart posture. And when our heart is aligned and we think of it as what we have is all his, it's a lot easier to give.
Yeah. So when you're talking to, let's say that you and I were out grabbing a cup of coffee someplace, and somebody sees you and I out there, they know us from Lakeland, they know, let's say that they watched this video at some point, and they wanted to talk to you a little bit more about what can be that next step that I, as a spiritual child, can take to move towards giving. What would be like that one next step that you would give them to help them take that next step of moving into generosity?
Yeah, simply understanding where your money's going is a good thing. If you can break down even where your money's going on a monthly basis, and even start by identifying what would be the tithe, I guarantee there's things within our budget that we can break out that any of us can tithe. It's just a heart posture to be able to do that. And I've even, in times as I've coached people, you want to be you understanding and understand even for myself, it was a hard transition and for our family, but even starting with a little and getting into that giving mode and just seeing the fruits that start coming out of that, it'll be a blessing.
Yeah. For that same individual, maybe the hardest part might be their walk with God in the process. What advice would you give to them in helping them understand, like, hey, God's in this with you, that it's okay to take this next step? What would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, money's a part of that. Money's a part of the heart posture of just giving like it's all His. And when we're aligned that way, it's a spiritual overflow that basically it dominoes into the rest of the things that we're going through in life.
Yeah, so good. This step in generosity is one of many next steps that we all take at some point. For a lot of us, it's one of the hardest steps that we can take, just as you heard Kent share with his own story. Let me encourage you as you continue to journey through this discipleship pathway and you're investigating this step all the further, diving into those toolkits. If you have any questions about this topic of generosity and taking this next step in your journey, feel free to reach out. We would love to have that conversation with you. But know that we're for you, we're in your corner, and we can't wait to see you further along on the discipleship pathway.